Today's date is August 15th, 2013. This is an oral history interview being conducted under the Schoodic Institute. The interviewee is Robert Dickie, and the interviewer is Jasper Sheehan. This interview is being conducted at the Schoodic Education and Research Center. Please state your full name and present address.
My name is Robert William Dickie, D-I-C-K-I-E. My present address is 4900 Ellesmere Avenue in Bethesda, Maryland. Zip code is 20814.
How long have you lived at your present home?
We've lived at our present location for about 25 years.
Where and when were you born?
I was born April 4th, 1936 in Portland, Oregon.
So you lived in Portland as a child?
Yes, I lived in Portland until I entered the Navy when I was 19 years old.
So what can you recall about your family home and hometown?
Well, I'm very fond of the West Coast. I like the climate. I like the surroundings, the geography. My family was, my parents, grandparents I should say, my grandfather was Scottish, immigrated to, was born actually in Renfrew, Ontario, Canada, ended up on the West Coast. My mother's side of the house was Irish. Great-grandmother was born in a covered wagon going out to the West Coast. And then they eventually ended up living in the general vicinity of Portland, Oregon. I went to high school in Portland, a place called Benson Polytechnic High School. I attended my first year of college at Portland State College in Portland. And I began, I was very avid interest in the Forest Service. I worked for the Forest Service a couple of summers, and I envisioned myself having a career in the Forest Service. So I began to go to Oregon State College and study forestry. I wasn't real dedicated and real serious about going to school, so they invited me to take a little time off. And during that time off is when I joined the Navy. Part of the reason was I hadn't passed enough time for my academic suspension. And when I was growing up, laying around the house with no job and nothing to do was not an option. So I decided that I would join the military. And at that time, I was interested in joining the Army in the airborne paratroopers, simply because the paratroopers got an extra $50 a month for jumping out of airplanes. And when I approached the Army, they told me, they asked me if I ever had any broken bones. And I said I did. In fact, it was my ankle. And they said, well, that's unacceptable. They said, we'll break your bones after we get you, but you've got to start out at least in one piece. So they turned me down. So what I did was I went down the hall to the next door and joined the Navy. Took their various entrance tests, aptitude tests. I did pretty well on those initial tests. And the Navy was, unlike the Army, the Navy would not promise or offer you any career field, any special job. They said, after you enter boot camp, go through a series of testing and training, they would determine what your career field would be. And even if you did real well on the selection test, they would not promise you anything.
So where were you living at the time when you joined the Navy?
I entered the service from Portland, Oregon. And it was interesting because the basic training and boot camp was in San Diego, California. And we flew from Portland to San Diego. That was 28th of December in 1955. And that was the first time I was ever on an airplane. And that was the first time I was ever outside of the state of Oregon. So the whole thing was a pretty big adventure.
So what were your first days in the service like?
Well, I suppose it's pretty much the same for everyone. It's rather noisy, confusion, disorienting. They purposely are trying to reshape you into something that they can work with. So they want to break down any individuality and any independent thoughts you might have. So it was my first experience, other than the Forest Service, of meeting people from different states. My boot camp company had around 95 kids in it. And so it was kids from all over the United States, different background, different education. Out of the 90 or 95 kids in the company, they had a classification they called a high school seaman recruit, meaning if we were all seaman recruits, but if you had completed high school, that was a little educational benefit, or a boost in a way. And out of the 90 kids in my company, probably only about half had finished high school. And I had had a couple of years of college, so when they chose the petty officer leadership for the boot camp company, my drill instructor chose me to be the educational petty officer. So it was my responsibility as we proceeded through basic training to assimilate all the training classes we were being exposed to, and then come back and teach the material to the slower moving people so that our weekly test scores would not be real bad, because there's a lot of competition between groups to have good marching scores, good academic scores, good inspection for cleanliness and uniforms and all that kind of stuff. So it was my job to try to take the slower learners and keep them up to speed. And that was my first experience of some kind of Navy responsibility.
So tell me about your boot camp and training experiences and how you got through those.
Boot camp was, it starts out as kind of a shock because you're not used to such a regimented routine, and you're not used to people that don't all think the same way and all work together. So one of the goals is to get your head wrapped around the problem to where you can function as a team and support one another. The difficulties of passing barracks inspection, the short amount of time allowed to eat, but the physical part of it was not, the physical part of the training was not a problem. I had worked fighting fires in the Forest Service. I had worked with chainsaws and axes, chopping down trees. I had taken boxing in college, so I was in pretty good physical shape. My biggest problem was not getting enough to eat. But it all went by pretty quickly, and we had a chief petty officer. My chief was a boiler tender. That was his Navy job. And he was our drill instructor. And he started out with a pretty dim view of all the people he had to work with. But by the time we finished the boot camp, he pulled me aside and told me that I'd probably make out okay in the Navy and probably get by.
Earlier you mentioned barracks inspection. What did that entail?
Well, every day somebody would walk through and inspect the way your beds were made up, the cleanliness of the berthing area and the bathrooms and this sort of thing. And we had to wash our clothes every day in a bucket. And so we had a concrete wash table out in the back of the barracks and a bucket. and a bunch of short little pieces of cord they called tie ties. And there was a particular way to hang each piece of clothing, whether it was a t-shirt or underwear or your dungaree trousers or your shirts, whatever, had to be hung in just a precise manner. And so someone would come through and look at the clothesline, see how things were hanging. And if they weren't hung properly, they would yank them down and throw them on the ground, and then have the company march back and forth over these clothing items or your mattress covers or whatever it was. Of course, 90 people walking on top of your clothes or your mattress covers just makes them dirtier. But the point was to get you to learn how to hang your clothes up. And you washed your clothes in a bucket, scrubbed them on this concrete table, wrung them out, hung them up. So then once a week, somebody from the headquarters would come through and have a sea bag inspection. So everything that you were issued, all the clothes that you were issued, had to be folded in a precise manner, had to be put in a little small wall locker, and then for inspection days it had to all be laid out on the bunk in a particular way. So they were looking to see if the socks were folded right, the t-shirts were folded right, the razor blades and the razor were in the right direction. Just kind of picky stuff, but it's all kind of gets you used to doing things on a regular basis, doing them in this particular way, and being clean. Because when you're living in real close quarters, you can't be slovenly and dirty and unkept for general health purposes and everything else. You got to be, you don't have any space anyway. So it all has a point, you just don't see it at the beginning.
How many duty stations had you served at before getting assigned to NSGA Winter Harbor, and what was your rate and rank when you got there?
Before coming to Winter Harbor, I had been to 7 different duty stations. My rank when I came here, I was a Chief Warrant Officer 2. There were 4 grades of warrant officer, and I was CWO 2. Prior to being the Chief Warrant Officer, I had been a Chief Petty Officer in the Communications Branch, which was the O branch. So I was my warrant assignments were, at least initially, started out to be based on my communications background.
Do you remember arriving at Winter Harbor and what it was like?
Oh, very much so. We drove up here from Washington, D.C., came down Route 1, down 186, came down to the center of town, and followed the signs out to the base. And I mean, it's just drop dead gorgeous, picturesque, beautiful. Checked in and reported for duty, and then we were taken back into town. The park at that time was not one way. It didn't become one way until later in the summer. So we drove back into town, and we stayed on Sargent Street in a little tiny wooden cabins for the week or so until we got assigned permanent quarters. The people that I knew a few people prior to coming here. When I was in Washington, the prospective commanding officer, Commander Williamson, was at Washington. The maintenance officer was named Matchett, and one other I can't recall. So I made the point of introducing myself before we left Washington, so that when we got here and we got in our official roles and we had to interact with each other, have some basis for familiarity. When we got here, the administrative officer was a fellow named Lieutenant Adams, William Adams. I had served with him previously in Hawaii. The commanding officer was Henry Jefferson Davis III. I had served with him in the Philippines. So it was a delight checking in, and I just look forward to working with the people and the person I relieved, the communications officer, another warrant officer named Norman Lynch. Norman Lynch and I had gone to communication school together, security group training school together. So I was relieving an old friend. And as a matter of fact, I got to stay in, I mean, we worked out where I got his house. And so it was number 56 on Cape Art housing. A little semicircle of, I don't know, 15 or 20 Cape Art houses that was assigned to chiefs and officers for their living quarters.
So were you married or single when you arrived?
I was married. We have 4 children. The oldest was our daughter. She was 10 years old at the time. She went to school with Michelle Berman and Vicki Torrey, who is now Vicki Timmons, and all the other Torrey children. We had 3 sons that were, let's see, 10, 9, 8, 6. It was kind of funny because our son, our youngest son, was his birthday is in November, and when we left the D.C. area, he had already attended kindergarten as a 5-year-old. And when we got up here in Winter Harbor, his birthday was in the wrong month. So he had to be 6 or 5 or something. I guess it was 6 to start kindergarten. He had to be 6 by September. Well, his birthday was November. So he couldn't go in the 1st grade. They would allow him to go to kindergarten the 2nd year, but not the 1st grade. So we chose to not put him in school. He just stayed. He'd already been to kindergarten, so we didn't feel there was any advantage to that. So he stayed home with his mother, and the other kids were, I don't know, 5th, 4th, 3rd, something like that. And the interesting part about that is that Mrs. Backman was my daughter's teacher, and they corresponded until Mrs. Backman died. My daughter corresponded with Vicki Torrey and came back in 1989 or whenever to her wedding. So we had a very close connection with the kids on their level and my wife and I on our level. Yeah.
How did people entertain themselves on the base?
Well, there was a lot of intramural sports activities. The captain, the CO at the time, Commander Williamson, was very athletic and very active. He encouraged intramural sports. There was a bowling alley. They had movies once in a while. And then the Welfare and Recreation Department provided a lot of trips. For example, to go off the base and go to Ball Mountain and skiing almost every week during the winter, of course. Went to different ponds for ice skating. Some of the people had access to boats and would go out in the ponds. The welfare department had snowmobiles, so we'd go up here on Albee Field, or which is now the baseball field up by the Scuti Commons, and drive around the base and through some of the trails. They've had occasionally, they would have sports competition with local high school kids. And then, of course, there was fishing and hunting. everything that was seasonal. And there was just plenty to do, at least from my perspective. The single guys living in barracks may not have thought so, but I thought that the base provided a well-rounded recreational program, and plus there's work. I mean, it's, you know, that's why you're here, is to work. So there was not a loss for things to do.
What did you find yourself doing when on
Well,
duty?
my kids were of the Cub Scout age group, so I was involved in the Cub Scout program. One of my petty officers that worked for me was named David Seward, who is just about ready to retire from Anderson's Hardware. He was a scoutmaster, so I was very much inclined to support him in the Boy Scout activities. Because the captain was so enthusiastic about intramural sports, and there was only 14 officers assigned to the base, in order for the officers to field a team on the intramural competition, practically everybody had to play, whether you had any talent or not. And I wasn't particularly talented as an athlete, but I played softball, football, volleyball, basketball. As a matter of fact, I had my sternum cracked, my chest was broken in a softball game when I was a catcher and the first baseman and I were looking up and chasing down a pop-up, and we collided. His first baseman hit me with his shoulder right in the middle of the chest and cracked my sternum, which is about one of the most painful things I've ever experienced. But bowling alley, we went, again, the officers entered into competition with bowling. And then we socialized with the Naval Astronautics Group, Dead Alpha, over at Prospect Harbor. And made ourselves available to, like I say, in the winter we went skiing every week. So I just did a little bit of everything. And that was one of the hallmarks of being here, was the community spirit, the activity, involvement of everybody, and the participation of everybody in almost everything was just really remarkable about the assignment here.
Did you re-enlist or get promoted while stationed at Winter Harbor?
No, my rank at the time was Chief Warrant Officer 2. In between, the promotion opportunities for warrant officers occur every 4 years. So I was kind of in the middle of, I've only been a W-2 for a couple of years. But what I did do, and what was a major thing for me, was in 1971, the Navy decided to allow warrant officers to attend the Naval Postgraduate School to earn a college degree, because typically warrant officers didn't have college degrees. And also pilots didn't have college degrees. So in order to make the officer community all have a college level education, they had this program out in Monterey, California at the Naval Postgraduate School. They offered every warfare community, and the security group, cryptologic community was one of those, 2 people a year to go to. So I submitted a request, the captain endorsed it, and I was selected to go. So I was the first one of 2 to be selected to go in the very first year of this program. So it wasn't exactly a rank promotion, but it was an education promotion. So after attending postgraduate school for 2 years and getting my degree, then my career changed quite a bit after that.
What were the surrounding towns like when you were stationed at Winter Harbor?
Well, in a word, small. At the time, Winter Harbor's population was about 400 people, maybe less. And the base population was about 350. So the base was just about equal size of the town. And since we come up here for this visit, we've been to Lubec and my family went to see Campobello. We've been back to Bangor a couple times, been out to Bar Harbor. And all I can say is that everything between here and Bangor or Campobello, Lubec was much smaller, much smaller. And the tree growth and shrubbery and bushes was much less. So my impression is that it's more vegetation, more population. I mean, like Sullivan and Hancock were tiny places. They're not very big right now, but they're all, you know, much smaller than, I mean, it's 41 years ago, so it's natural that things would change quite a bit.
Did you do much sightseeing in Maine while stationed at Winter Harbor?
No. My wife was involved with the Algonquin Indians up in a little farther north, and she led a women's group to gather things to help the Indians get a livelihood. But my job was to be, you know, communications officer. So I've other than going skiing, I didn't travel anywhere. Well, I went to Moosehead Lake. Again, the base sponsored a ski trip to Moosehead Lake, so Moosehead Lake was as far as I got away from here. Yeah.
Do you recall any particularly humorous or unusual event that occurred during your time at Winter Harbor?
Well, nothing humorous particularly comes to mind, except just normal, you know, kidding around people would do. But what I do remember very vividly was the winter of 70, 71, when we had a Weather Bureau certified blizzard, and the operations people out of Korea were snowed in for a day. And in spite of the best efforts of the Korean community and the base community to plow the roads open to get the people out there and deliver food to them, they weren't successful. So the people were stranded out there for a day or two and had to sleep on the floor and eat sea rations and things. But the temperature, it was, you know, 20 below zero for a while. I'd worked in the woods in Oregon at 30 below zero, so that was not a big deal. But the amount of snow, we have pictures in front of our house with at least 4 or 5 feet of snow, almost like a tunnel to get into the garage. And the park road, trees on both sides of the road were weighted down with what in the West Coast we call it a silver thaw, where ice and snow freezes on the branches, and then the weight of the branches, they just droop to the ground. Well, they drooped from both sides of the road to the point you couldn't drive through the park. And we also lost our communications for a while because the telephone lines, which carried the communication lines, were weighted down and broke. So we had to wait for the phone company to come out and put the lines back up. So other than that, it was just an all-around pleasant experience, just a pleasant lifestyle. Every day was nice, and the commanding officer, anywhere in the world or any place in the world, sets the tone. And Commander Williamson set the tone of this place, and we had a very professional, very cordial, and civilized, you know, lifestyle. It was just really nice. My family and I consider Winter Harbor as the finest tour we ever had in the Navy. I have had operational experiences that are different and a little more demanding, but as far as a family tour of duty, and at the particular time in our life, it was probably our favorite experience. And the fact that we're here now after 41 years to go to the Lobster Festival pretty much attests to our affection for this place.
What do you remember about the barracks and of the food served at the galley?
The barracks was modest in size, but it was very comfortable in my opinion, and very fortunate for the unaccompanied enlisted men to have a place on base. It's nice. And the galley was absolutely, positively the best food I ever had in the Navy. And the Navy has a award program for food service. It's called the NAY Award, N-E-Y. And they award this competition annually for excellence in food service for large commands, medium-sized commands, and small commands. And Winter Harbor won the NAY Award for a small short base activity for years in a row, years and years in a row. And it was just absolutely top-notch food service. One of the things that I remember is every 7 or 8 days I'd had to be the duty officer, and the duty officer would sit in the galley and have a little table where he would eat by himself. And if anybody in the mess hall had a grievance or some kind of complaint, they could come over and express that concern to the duty officer. So I remember a couple of young sailors coming over to me and asking to talk to me, and they had a complaint. And there was something that they didn't like about the food, or they didn't have the selection that they particularly wanted. And they kind of wanted fast food, like McDonald's or something like that. And they couldn't get a Coke. So in the end, they put a Coke machine in. But I asked these kids where they had been in the Navy, what was their Navy experience, and they told me they'd been to school and maybe one or two other places. So I told them that, in my opinion, they had just never been any place that was bad. They did not have any basis for understanding what bad food could be, and they didn't realize how good they had it here. So I told them, I said, I dismissed them. I said, I didn't even want to talk to you. If you got a legitimate complaint, fine, but I said, this place is the finest food service you ever want to see. I was very, very impressed with it.
Were you active in any of the intramural sports on the base?
Just in the sports?
Yeah, I believe so.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, the captain was a very, very sports-minded. So I played. I never played sports in high school because I was kind of on the skinny side and had asthma and didn't not long-winded. But I played everything that came down the pike, from ping pong, bowling, football, basketball, softball, like I said earlier. And quite honestly, that was about the only time I ever played sports. I've jogged most of my life because running is pretty easy and gives you a lot of time to think about things. So it was almost involuntary, but yes, I did everything that they offered.
What did you think of the people you served with at Winter Harbor?
In the service? Well, the security group has pretty high entry-level standards, so they get the cream of the crop to begin with. And everybody that I've served with very minor exception, were very, very good-natured, hardworking, intelligent, well-rounded too. I mean, for example, like Dave Seward he did administrative jobs all day long for the Navy, and then he was the preeminent Boy Scout leader on the side. And most of the people that had kids tended to be involved or support activities for their kids. So from a professional point of view, very dedicated, and I think very good representative of the kind of people that were served in the security group.
Did you make many friends?
I would like to think so. My wife made more friends on the outside than I did, and then I benefited from her friendships, because once the women get acquainted, then the rest of the family kind of gets pulled in. But what was really kind of funny, people have a reputation, whether it's deserved or not, of being, sort of close held, and when you're out of towners, you don't always get drawn in and welcomed right away, because people are just kind of waiting to see how you turn out. But we had just the finest friendships with the local community. For example, over on Grindstone Neck, there was a lady that had, her name was Jan Talcott. She had a big house with a white picket fence along the front of it, and we got acquainted with her. And we, over on Birch Harbor, when you come out of the park entrance, there was a lady named Mrs. Gosler, Blanche Gosler. She was pretty well known in the area because she grew a lot of flowers in her, probably for her livelihood, but she grew flowers and then sold them to people in the area. My wife met the author of the book called Winter Harbor. I think her name was Rich Dickinson. And then as we met people in the stores and the post office and up and down the street, the Navy people, obviously, as you get acquainted and work with people, you expand your friendships. But we look back with the friends, and our kids got along with their classmates. So we thought it was a great community interaction. And again, part of the reason we're here now is because we had such strong memories of the Lobster Festival. When we were here, the Lobster Festival was held on Fraser's Point. So people from town would come out, and people from the base would go down there, and they'd set up all the food service and all the games and stuff, and then they could watch the lobster boat races from the shoreline. So a lot of good friendships.
Tell me about the quality of the officer and enlisted leadership on the base.
Well, I'm probably not, I'm a little biased because I thought it was pretty good. And it starts with the commanding officer, any place. But they were all experienced people, both the officer and senior enlisted. They took care of everybody, and they were focused on the mission. And it was a challenge to keep a lot of young single guys occupied, particularly when they're way out in the woods. So I think that we didn't have any, as I recall, we didn't have any unusual disciplinary problems. When for example, the schooner club, when it was built to be a recreational or entertainment club for all pay grades. Usually you could have a place for the officers to socialize, the chief petty officers, and then the lower enlisted. And those facilities didn't exist here. I mean, they just didn't have the place or the space. So when the schooner club was built, it was to be for everybody. And it worked pretty well, in my opinion. It was used for a lot of base activities. Sports field up there, Albee Field, a great picnic area. So I would say, based on the outstanding work results and the lack of disciplinary problems, that the leadership was very good.
What was the primary mission of the base when you were stationed at NSGA Winter Harbor?
Well, the base had several missions, and the only one that I feel like I can address is the safety at sea, because they provided search and rescue assistance if it was ever needed. And so there were other things, but I don't feel like I can discuss it.
Do you think the base was successful in accomplishing its missions?
Oh, I know it was, because I know what the assessment of the base's activity was, and we always had very favorable approval ratings or assessments of the mission accomplishment. So on that regard, I'm very confident of that.
Where were you assigned for duty while stationed at Winter Harbor?
Well, my duty, as I said earlier, I was a communications officer, and my duty location was at Korea site, and there were that was the location of the operations department, of which there were 5 departments, and communications was one of them, and that was my job. The Scudic site was the administrative location for all of the other base support functions. So everything operations related was out at Korea.
Were you ever a watchstander?
No, not here. I mean, I stood as many watches as anybody else has in the Navy, but my job as a communications officer is a day job. I say day, but it's kind of funny. As you know, the weather up here in the winter, it gets dark early. The Navy has a tradition, or the military has a tradition, of raising and lowering the flag every day, sunrise and sunset. Well, the sun doesn't come up very early, and it goes down at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon instead of 5 or 6 or 7. So the only time I ever saw daylight was on the weekends. I'd go to work in the morning, it's dark, and I'd come out at 5 or 6 o'clock at night, and it's dark. So it was only when I was home on the weekends that I would see daylight.
What was your specific job assignment? What did that entail?
Well, as a communications officer, I was responsible for the maintenance and the performance of the communications facilities here at the base. And that involved the daily operation as well as the upkeep of the equipment. And we also supported Dead Alpha over at Prospect Harbor for certain communication things. So again, it was just making sure that the base communications was up and running.
What are your fondest memories of the time you spent at Winter Harbor?
Well, I guess it would be a kind of a collage of just good work associates, teamwork of the people at work, certain individuals, specific individuals, the wholesomeness of the lifestyle, the weather. I mean, this is absolutely the purest atmosphere I've ever lived in. The weather is cold, but you can get dressed up when it's cold. Just good work, good friends, and a wonderful setting.
And your worst memories?
Well, without being too gratuitous, I don't think I have any worst memories. I mean, I don't think there's nothing ever happened to me or my family or anything at work that was bad. I mean, there were a couple of odds and ends from time to time, but I mean, when I think about Winter Harbor and my tour here, I don't have a worst memory.
Did you receive any special awards or decorations while you were assigned to Winter Harbor?
No. Most people just do their job, and my reward was being selected to go to postgraduate school.
Did you ever become active in the civilian community? And
Only to the extent that I was in the Boy Scout or Cub Scout program, and the Cub Scout troop or pack, whatever, was all the kids in the town. It was Navy families' kids, and it was townspeople's kids. So but that's about the extent of my personal participation.
Do you recall any national news events that headlined during your time at Winter Harbor?
Oh, let's see, 70 to 72. They're probably international politics, but nothing leaps out right now. I'm sure there were world events going on, but nothing that put a spotlight on us or Winter Harbor.
What were your primary concerns and motivations as a Navy person during the time you spent at Winter Harbor?
Well, my primary concern as a Navy person is that I do my job well, and my personal job, my singular job, has always been to support the person I work for at whatever grade I was at any particular time, and success of the mission. And as one of the operations officers, my job was to support the commanding officer. So when somebody asked me, "What do you do?" I said, "I support the CO." And I had my operations boss one time who was new, and he was coming around to all the departments and interviewing all of his officers, and he would say, "What do you do? What do you do best?" And I said, "Well, I'm the comm officer. I support the old man." He said, No. I mean, what about the comm center?" I said, "I can do anything in here. I mean, this is my life." But I said, "I don't do this stuff. I have all these enlisted guys that do it, and I just kind of oversee it. So my job is to support the CO." And I don't know if he liked that answer, but that's how I viewed it. So I was pretty content with what I was doing.
When did you transfer from Winter Harbor, and where did you go afterward?
We left Winter Harbor in June of 1972. And my next assignment, as I mentioned earlier, was the Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey, California. So, and that was the beginning of a 2-year educational process.
How did being stationed at Winter Harbor affect your life?
Well, I guess it made me appreciate good things. And then when you think things are maybe a little stressful, and I've often thought a lot about the tranquility and the peace and quiet up here. As a matter of fact, I've had a couple of educational exercises, and they ask you to focus on something real peaceful and quiet. And I think about Scudic Point out there, that they sit down on those rocks, listen to the water pounding on the waves blowing up there, and I can relax and just divorced myself from a lot of stuff. So again, and the follow-on association of friends, work associates that I made here continued in future years. So that was people that I met for the first time, and then they remained friends. So that's a very positive thing about being here.
How do you feel about what the Schoodic Institute and the National Park Service have done with the facilities?
Oh, I think it's an absolute marvel. I mean, first of all, I've always had an interest in Forest Service, forestry, botany, science, things like that. And to have a facility that is as rich in resources. I mean, you go out and you look at the flora and the fauna, what a place to be. And the shoreline and the rock-bound coast of Maine, all that kind of stuff. I mean, this is just a paradise. And what an educational opportunity to see things in a natural setting and unadulterated. I think it's a wonderful, my son tells me that there are, I guess maybe you read this, but there are circ facilities in other national parks also. I didn't know that. I think it's marvelous, and I hope it can be adequately funded, and it's a wonderful service. I'm really impressed with it.
Is there anything else you would like to add or talk about that we have not covered in this interview?
No, things pop in and out of my mind from time to time, but it was just a great family experience, very satisfying mission experience, and a lot of good friends. And that was enough to make us want to come back for this year's Lobster Festival. So, that's it.
Well, lastly, I want to thank you for your time and for your service.
Thank you. Thank you for your time too.